Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! What a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
An interesting game leads to 3 points away at Bournemouth. But what's that you say? You want a 90-minute podcast devoted exclusively to Aubameyang playing center forward? You've come to the right place. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Look, there's a lot of stuff we can get to. There's the Mesut Ozil thing. There's the impending trip to, Paul, what's it called?
Foreskin pullover.
That one, there's all that. We can get to lots of stuff, but 90 straight minutes just on Aubameyang up front. That's what this podcast is about, and we're staying on brand. Before we get started, I want to thank everybody who listened to our 250th episode. It was such a joy to have Amy Lawrence on. Real pleasure, and we appreciate her so much for coming on. Great to have Arseblog and Gunnerblog on for a little, shall we say, crossover episode. And of course, there was a part of the podcast none of you listened to towards the end where Clive and Paul and I did some stuff. But we do appreciate you. 250 episodes. It's great. So many of you have signed up for Patreon over the last week. We appreciate that too. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, all that stuff. And certainly go ahead and sign up. If you don't want to, no big deal. We're going to be telling you about ladies' delicates later. The lingerie. You'll be hearing about it. We might
and
even
what
get some.
They can put them in.
And what? Oh dear. Anyway, that's coming up later. And we want to thank our friends at The Enclosed for that. We'll tell you more about that later. But first, Paul's on Twitter at Pause in My Pants. Hello, Pause.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter at Clive PAFC. Hello, Clive. He was on mute. Unmute and say hello. Tim is on Twitter at Scoberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Hello there. I don't know. I mean, is Clive just frustrated that I want to talk about Aubameyang? Let's quickly see if Clive is actually part of the conversation. Hello, Clive. I will stop it, Paul. I will tell you that Clive was concerned that he was not getting great internet before we started, and we all assured him he was fine and we should just go on with it. And now here we are on the podcast, and I have no idea if Clive's on. You know what? We're going to get started, and we're going to see if Clive is here. So, Tim, I'll start with you. Away to Bournemouth. I'm weird because it seems like when everyone zigs, I zags. There was a lot of angst over this performance. I thought it was a really creditable performance away at a tricky place, playing to a team that, as you pointed out in your match preview on Patreon, that I thought was quite excellent, that they can be a very exceptional counterattacking side. And I think the other thing that's making life difficult, maybe for the players, but definitely for the supporters, is the way Emery just keeps tinkering. And he did it again, started with a back three, Ozil not in the team. How surprised were you to see him go back three for this game?
Yeah, I was quite surprised, actually. I'd fairly pleasantly surprised as well because of the way Bournemouth play. They play, they have kind of two centre forwards, but they have two wide players as well who are really quite attacking and come in field. So I was pleasantly surprised because I thought it looked to me like a plan that I could follow. And listen, it doesn't have to be a plan I can follow for it to be a good plan, but I looked at it and I thought, yeah, I can follow the thinking there. We've adjusted to Bournemouth's threat. And yeah, you're right. I spoke a bit in the preview about their threat, about how good they are on the counter attack, about how many people they leave forward. So I was quite surprised by the lineup, but then I'm usually surprised by the lineups. It's difficult to get a read on exactly what we're going to do at the moment. But I, like you, I was quite enthused by this game actually, because I expected this to be really tough. I just think we're in a space where we're really, really analysing every single game to try and follow a pattern. And I think you're right. The pattern is at the moment that we change the plan in every game. And maybe that's why we start slowly. It's taking players a little while to pick up what they need to do. But I think in the normal run of things, you look at a 2-1 win away at Bournemouth in a nip and tuck tight game and you say, yeah, that's a really good result. That's what you want. But because we're kind of super sensitive about this, we're always starting slowly and we're creating narrative threads between performances. And I understand that, but I think if you take this in isolation, this was a decent enough performance. I think, we had a plan for Bournemouth and it was a very good result.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And I think, some of this may be clouded by the fact that there were a few dodgy moments in the game that made it nervy, and certainly The way Spurs dismantled Chelsea, I think has people worrying about, how we'll hold up in the North London Derby, but you can only take one game at a time. And I thought we did perfectly fine in this game. I certainly thought this was better than, what we did just before the interlull. So, Paul, let me ask you this. I mean, we did go to a back three. It was a lot of change, and I think we started slowly. I mean, coming off an international break and in a new system, I don't think that's to be something to be too surprised about, but it was definitely a rough first 20 minutes. What do you think was going wrong in the early stages that maybe we corrected that allowed us to get back into the game?
Well, I think they found the formation on the internet or something and thought, "Oh, this would be worth a shot." Because, you just got
Clive's
the sense.
been calling for a back three.
Yeah. Well, we've been calling, or certain people have been calling, and other people have been saying, yeah, that'd be interesting for a kind of a 3-4-1-2 formation, and this turned out to be 3-4-2-1. But most of our problems were at the back, just players finding each other with the ball. We were very pensive, but you got to contrast that to what you would have expected to see had you listened to Tim's Patreon preview, which I did. I was absolutely terrified. I shit myself mid-Patreon, mid-review.
Your results will vary.
Yeah. So, they were clear. They got to have been rubbing their hands for this game coming up. And we've been pretty uninspired recently with our 4-2-3-1 or whatever we want to call it. So I think we should have been all very respectful of what Bournemouth were capable of doing here. And I was pleased that the manager showed that respect. But yeah, for 19, it's funny. It's almost exactly on 20 minutes. It's just before 20 minutes we start to play and we start to find each other and people start to be in positions and moving into space and giving each other options. And up till that, their pressing, their formation, they dominate the personality of the game, the energy. I mean, they're at home with the crowd behind them. Nothing too shocking except how poor we are. And then after about 20 minutes, we start imposing ourselves on the first half to the point where we eventually get that own goal. But, we're imposing ourselves on them, and it's a pretty damn good assist from Kolasinac's first assist of the day into it. And you mightn't say we'd earned it because maybe they were due a goal in that first 20 minutes. But, that's what happens when you put the pressure on and you get it into the box and you're getting cutbacks in. Lacazette had that goal early on in the season with the ball in from the right, I think in from Bellerin into him, where the defender own goaled it in, but you could give most of the credit to Bellerin and Lacazette, and this was a bit like that, putting the pressure on them. So it took us 20 minutes for people to pop into pockets to give each other options. And then, as you guys have hinted at, this game could have gone either way, but at least we dictated the game we wanted to play and started creating real chances and cutbacks. And it seems this year, if we're not creating cutbacks, we're not really creating. So this was an interesting game.
Well, and it certainly, it's informed in part by the selection at center forward, because with Lacazette, you've got a center forward who's going to drop in and build the play, and in Aubameyang, you want to get into wide spaces and play crosses and cutbacks, and you saw that for his winner later in the game. I also think what changed for us, Paul, to your point, is early in the game, it felt like the defenders were playing a lot of passes to one another and horseshoe passing, full, wing back to central defender to central defender to wing back, and we weren't playing a lot of vertical passes. And in a back three, I think the center backs have a lot more responsibility for starting the build-up, breaking lines, playing between the lines of midfield. And they weren't doing that. They were going a lot more laterally. But then once they started playing those vertical passes, once Mustafi, once Socrates, once Holding started finding Xhaka popping up between the lines and Torreira popping up between the lines, or even Iwobi and Mkhitaryan, then our attack started to get into gear a little more. And I just thought it took them a little time to find that rhythm. I mean, Clive, for you, how do you think?
It did, and I think Bournemouth burned some energy too. And after about 20 minutes, maybe it ebbed and then flowed.
And then maybe we had just that extra yard because the center backs were a lot more conservative early, and then had the space to look up and maybe break lines a little better as time went by. I mean, Clive, I know you've wanted to see a back three. I think your presumption, to Paul's point, was going to be 3-4-1-2 with Ozil playing 10 and Lacazette and Aubameyang pairing each other in center forward. That obviously didn't happen today. I mean, were you impressed with what the coach did in setting us up and how we performed in the new formation?
Yeah, for me, this was the most impressive coaching performance of the season, without a doubt. You have to always look at a game in context, right? So the top 3 hardest working teams in the league are Tottenham, Arsenal and Bournemouth. So straight away, listen to his pre-match press conference. He must have used the words intensity about 10 times, right? He kept speaking about it. In hindsight, there's no surprise that Ozil was dropped if he was looking for increased intensity. And I've waited for years to have a manager that consistently focuses on the next game and how to achieve victory, right? So he'd worked out he needed to run with them, right? Have quite a physical team. Callum Wilson, Ryan Fraser and Brooks, and I think it's David Brooks. Brooks was a young kid who's just kept Aaron Ramsey out of the Welsh team in a higher up position and demoted him to the middle 2. This kid's going to be a real talent. He's come from Sheffield United and he's going to be one of the next British superstars, trust me on that. Ryan Fraser's got the highest assists in the Premier League, I believe, before this game anyway. And his stats are up there if anybody's in Europe, right? So, and Callum Wilson, a New England debutant that was flying. And the whole setup and narrative was Eddie Howe, lots of British players, the Arsenal are coming, lots of exposés in the week with BBC, Sky, etc. Game was set up. And I love the fact he adjusted his team to cope with 3 players in particular, which I felt were a real threat to us with their speed, allied to Josh King. And so the back 3, I like the back 3. I want it to work. I'm not wed to it because I don't think it works every week. But the fact he did it, put Socrates deepest, his quickest player, deepest, so we could try to, stop the channel ball, which I think was really, really good. He sort of nullified Callum Wilson. I thought he beat him up big time. And the fact we had an interior box with Torreira, Xhaka at the base and Mkhitaryan and Iwobi higher up. And that square was a trick, and how they fed the wing backs. And I think we killed some of their attacking play, particularly Brooks and Fraser, and we had them running backwards. And to me, tactically, this was absolutely superb how we did that. I think Bournemouth really fancied this game. They were the 6th, I think they're 6th in the league, just behind us. This was 5th versus 6th, and you've heard me say 1,000 times, respect the game, respect the opposition, respect what's on offer to you. And I felt we really did that, and controlled the middle. I say 2/3. If that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
I thought the start of the game was. I think we were very rusty in some areas, particularly Mkhitaryan. But by the end of the game, I thought we were stomping all over them until we got a little bit slack towards the last sort of 5 or 10 post-substitution. So for me, tactically, he's respected a very bright, very physical, very fast team on a tight, narrow pitch where they love slick passing. And Tim's preview was really insightful about the counter-attack, and I think we were set up to try to stop that.
Yes,
it didn't
totally
really work. But I thought when Tim did that, I thought, crikey, he's right. They are a sprinting team. They're going to break. They're going to wait for us to go lateral, and they're going to go into our fullback area. So the back 3 for me was pure genius. And again, we'll probably go into Aubameyang later, and I won't hog the time everybody else, but I've got a point about Aubameyang and how best to get the best out of him. And I think this game was all about that.
I will tell you what, I will allow you to make the point as long as the point is he is the greatest player in human history and must be center forward every game. Then it's fine.
I think it's one of our listeners that said something about I think it was Ramsey and Lacazette playing together, and it got me thinking about how to get the best out of Aubameyang, and to flanking with Iwobi and Mkhitaryan. High touch players that carry the ball, lots of touches that progress it up the pitch. It's exactly what he needs. He can't have a low touch players around him that want to run around him like, say, Ramsey does, for example.
And you need wide positions. You have to get into wide positions to make the most of Aubameyang. I mean, in the Premier League, you're not going to have the space to just run in behind the defenders with straight runs. So
he was beautifully cradled in his system, wasn't he? Beautifully cradled.
I thought so.
And his movement on the goal across the goal mouth,
tremendous.
Oh my God! You could, if you were to plot a curve of the points he hits, it's poetry. He's like a guy surfing a wave across the goal mouth. It's beautiful.
Untrackable. That sort of movement.
Okay, well, I'm loath to interrupt a conversation where Aubameyang is coming in for praise, but I'm going to bring Tim in real quick because I think, Clive, you hit on it. I thought that the wide forwards, the high-touch players in those wide forward positions were critical to our success, but they had contrasting performances. And Tim, I thought this might be a good time to sort of compare and contrast Iwobi, who I thought was arguably our best player on the day, or certainly up there, and Mkhitaryan, who may be finding that his right to take that position is waning with every passing performance. So you want to maybe compare and contrast the performances of our two wide forwards?
Yeah, I was interested in what Clive was saying there about having high touch players. I just had a little look at some of the stats from the game. This is the game where Arsenal have attempted the most passes in the final third, and that's without Ozil, and that tells you why Emery went with Mkhitaryan and Iwobi. He wanted, and I mean, just look at where the goals came from. It was the same move twice. Iwobi, little bit infield, hitting that overlap from Kolasinac, and thank you very much, getting the cut back in. But actually, I didn't think Mkhitaryan's performance. I completely agree. I thought Iwobi was our best player on the day. I thought he was superb. I thought the game was set up for him because Emery wanted intensity from the front. He wanted us to try and take the ball off of the Bournemouth defenders as well. There was quite a bit of pressing, which Iwobi's pretty decent at. And the reason he's played well this season is because he fits Emery's vision for a wide forward in that. You're not really a wide forward with Emery. You're kind of in those half spaces. So it really was set up nicely for him, and I think he really delivered, particularly on the second goal. And if Ozil does that, Ozil did play a very similar pass to that for Bellerin, I think a few weeks ago against Leicester, and we were drooling over that. So I don't think Mkhitaryan was as much of a disaster as everybody else did. It's a bit weird.
Well said, Tim. You've got me right with you, mate. Keep going.
Count me as one of the dilettantes, one of the plebes who thought he was terrible.
So here's the thing. I thought he was a bit of a disaster once he actually got the ball, but I thought his movement was incredibly valuable, whereas Iwobi stayed on that inside left position. Mkhitaryan wandered a bit like he did in the Fulham game, where he was kind of on the inside right, but he was coming much more into that number 10 space as well. And if you look at his kind of pass map, his heat map, he wandered quite a lot, and actually he combined with Iwobi quite a lot. And when he actually got the ball, he was quite disastrous a couple of times. But I actually think his movement unsettled Bournemouth, and I've said this a few times about Mkhitaryan recently, where I don't think he has actually played well in and of himself, but I still think he's been valuable in the positions he takes up, and he's another one who perhaps is a little bit closer to understanding or having the attributes that Emery likes in one of those wide forwards. And I still think, even in hindsight, it was the right decision to play him ahead of Mesut Ozil.
Well, I'm going to tell you something, Tim. I mean, and by the way, of course, I meant Philistine, not dilettante. I apologize for that. But Mkhitaryan is sort of playing this season's Alex Iwobi, in a sense, because Iwobi was a player who would get into really good positions, and our frustration with him was how often he squandered them. And I think you could say the same has happened to Mkhitaryan this season. He pops off the screen, or if you're lucky enough to be there, off the pitch. I mean, you see him, you notice him. He's not vanishing from games. It's that when he's getting into those positions where you notice him then doing the wrong thing. And so, maybe he's a player you stick with on the theory that he is involved a lot, and eventually he will just get the touches right, get the end product right. And maybe that is worth sticking with. And, really another important point you made about high-touch players, this has always been my argument with Aubameyang. He's a low-touch striker, but you can afford a low-touch player at center forward much more than you can afford that low-touch player and low defensive intensity player at wide forward. And so I think we saw today how valuable those high-touch forwards can be, and why the idea to go back to Lacazette and move Aubameyang wide is a big, big trade-off. And not because Lacazette is worse than Aubameyang. I mean, we all have our opinions on that, but more because of what it means moving a low-touch player into one of those wide forward positions. And so that is something that the manager is going to really, really struggle with, because I thought this worked in a lot of important ways, in large part because of the touches that you had from those wide forwards. And Paul, I mean, I guess the issue then obviously is what we did at halftime or right before halftime. And this is the interesting thing. You know, we mostly short-circuited what they do well, which is counterattack. And I thought, you know, what Emery seems to be good at is setting us up in a way that frustrates and confuses the opposition. I thought Bournemouth had a lot of the ball early in the game, but weren't really sure what to do with it. They want to play on the counter. I thought the way we played in the last 30 seconds of the first half was particularly unprofessional. I mean, maybe that's just me being my usual sort of hyperbolic self, but it was really disappointing. I think we were on top. We had been on a period of real dominance. We get the ball all the way into their box. Iwobi loses it. I thought he came in for a little more criticism than is deserved in that situation. But then there's a lot of people jogging back, and we just weren't switched on. We're expecting the halftime whistle to go. I mean, is your opinion of the goal we concede at halftime that it is largely down to the dreaded effort quality? I mean, I don't think that was a tactical problem or performance issue. To me, that looked like focus and effort and concentration.
I was surprised when Arsene Wenger popped up at the end of the match to describe that moment as naive. It was,
yeah, exactly. We've seen that
classic,
before. Yeah,
yeah. And to me, that's what it was. I mean, there was some talk about people jogging back, but Bellerin was running his socks off. He was running back. He looked fucking knackered. But the question is, why were both in Kolasinac and everybody else in the box where we're scrambling? But there was no need. There was absolutely no need for it. And there was no cover down our left-hand side when they swung it inevitably out to our right. And then, you know, I mean, they played balls without getting tackled, without really getting pressured. Everybody was trying to buy time to get cover back, which gave the player enough room to make the pass, make the next pass, and find the guy out wide. I mean, they had basically two guys nicely spaced over to the right, and they were able to swing it down one of our sides. And
I'm not
then
picking on him, but watch who Xhaka follows too. I mean, Xhaka makes the wrong defensive run there too.
Yeah, but you know, it's kind of one of those things. You could criticize every single player, almost, apart from maybe Holding, who just did what you're going to do, which is, you know, try and occupy a bit of space between two players. But you could criticize almost every player in midfield, wing back, and defensively for how they managed that situation. It's just a team failure. I don't know what the fuck we were thinking of. Where is the in-team intelligence, that spark between players, that communication, the bollocking afterwards, where whoever, Xhaka bollocks Bellerin, or whoever bollocks whoever, that says, hang on, we talked about that. This shit doesn't happen. Now, I did see some bollocking going on, but, you know, that thing has to stick. It's just pure. You could criticize whoever, Mustafi for not closing down whoever it was over on on our right wing, but it's 6-7 players who've made a decision there to naively try and get a second goal for no great reason with a minute to go at the end of the first half. That's not what you do.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I have less of a problem with them pushing for a second goal on the stroke of halftime as I do with just some of the jogging back and some of the lazy defensive runs to choke off that counterattack opportunity. And you know, maybe it's 6 of one, half dozen the other, or a little of each, right? Maybe it's pressed a little too high up the pitch chasing that second goal, you know, with the halftime whistle coming any moment. So everybody defensively was trying to buy time to get more cover because they were matched one-on-one. And it's a good finish in the end. But, you know, look, it's still just not the level of concentration and focus you want. But to our credit, we came out after halftime, and we were right back on top of them. And I thought we really dominated the second half. We've now scored the most goals of any team in the Premier League, having not led at halftime this season, quite incredibly. So, you know, I mean, there's positives to be taken from that. And I also like the fact that Emery wasn't quick to make a change. This time he let the team sort it out a little. He's starting to get a feel for, you know, when he wants to make those quick changes and when he wants to let the team figure it out. And the team did figure it out eventually. And Clive, I think this is a good time to sort of get back into the Aubameyang discussion. He does get the winner from rather brilliant center forward play. He did have a couple of misses on the day as well, although he has now scored with his last 8 consecutive shots on target. And I think this was one of his highest XG games of the season, despite not being involved a ton. I mean, there's such different strikers, Lacazette and Aubameyang, that it's almost hard to compare them because it's like comparing jazz and classical music. They're just totally different things to appreciate. What did you appreciate or maybe not appreciate about his performance in the center forward role this day?
I wasn't worried about his touches because we took them away from him. So my concern with him is we played him with Ozil, who's not really good at receiving the ball high up. When he's high up, he tends to run beyond, and he tends to come deep to receive it and sort of prompt from a deep area or a wide area, and he floats into spaces of difficulty, technical difficulty, and he moves it on. So he suits more of a Lacazette player who can take the first ball, take the physical burden away from him, and then he can do what he likes. He can go where no one else expects him to go. And when you play Lacazette with him, we're then asking Lacazette to come deep and receive the ball, and he doesn't play with wing mirrors on, right? He doesn't like it. He likes to see everything. When he sees things, he runs to the spot where he needs to be. So in Iwobi and Mkhitaryan, and I'm totally with Tim on Mkhitaryan. I mean, I read something today about his stats that he covered, and I felt he got stronger in the game. And it's quite interesting that they moved Mkhitaryan over to the left to block their most troublesome side, which tells you how he was motoring towards the end of the game. What fans tend to do is look at the execution and output and don't look at what he's doing for the whole team. We need to stop with that now and start to look at the fact that he's there for a plan and he's there to progress it. And he pressed the ball, stole the ball high, and played it straight through to Aubameyang. And the two of them, I thought, were absolutely pivotal to how we played. And they freed Aubameyang up to show his strengths. And I mean, he is a very interesting player. I felt I learned more about him in this game than any other, because now I think I've seen the balance for him. He needs work around him. He needs people who can steal the ball. He needs people who can give him the ball in broken field play where he can move straight away onto it. He separates from his defenders naturally. He creates yards with his quick thinking. I mean, he's quick-footed, but he is even, you often find fast players never have to use their brains because they've always been quicker than everybody else. Well, he's quick-brained and quick-footed. And I thought I was really impressed with him in this game because I felt he was a consistent threat as long as we supported him appropriately. And everybody knew, let's get it, move it, get it into wide areas. Let's try to create something to try to get it across that box to Aubameyang. I don't know how many crosses we put in this game, but we put in crosses, blind crosses sometimes to put it into the area. We fired low crosses into the area. I felt we really made Bournemouth defend. And Aubameyang, somebody who reads those crosses. I thought Bournemouth packed the box quite well. He reads those crosses, but I felt by pushing the ball forward into his area consistently, I felt we got them on the second goal. They knocked off, they're having a little rest, quick free kick, pop, down the side, cross the box, goal. And they were still breathing, trying to, with their hands on hips. They weren't ready for it because they'd been stressed throughout the entire game. We didn't play the horseshoe in front of them. We played the ball into him consistently. Every now and again, we go long diagonal, and it just went through to the keeper. But again, you're creating space. You're creating different problems, different attack threats, not just a pass, let everyone settle in and wait for the cross, defend wide areas and wait for the cross. No, we challenged them long. We challenged them combination. We challenged them down the sides. I tell you, this was my favourite Arsenal performance of the season tactically against one of the better sides that we played. And I felt we beat them handily. And I don't think there was I know everyone's focusing on Mkhitaryan's output in the first 20 in particular, but I felt it was a really good collective performance where I don't think anyone played bad.
Yeah, I mean, look, it would be easy to kill Mkhitaryan if we hadn't won it because you could say he had the chances to turn the game and didn't. Having said that, the fact that he had chances to turn the game, I mean, tells you how involved he was. Tim, before we take a quick break, I do want to get your thoughts on the Aubameyang thing too. I have read people on the internet saying he was terrible. Can't believe how terrible he was. He also scored the winner and had his, one of his highest XG games this season. I've seen people saying he was brilliant. I just think we lack some of the skills to evaluate and assess this kind of striker because we had Olivier Giroud, the ultimate lump it to the big guy up front target man. We had Lacazette playing center forward, who is more of a false nine. We had, Robin van Persie, who is more of a false nine. We had Marouane Chamakh, who was more of a fever dream that never happened. False player. But you look at a lot of the players we've had since Thierry Henry, really, and they haven't been the Aubameyang style of player.
No.
And so I'm not sure we have necessarily the right language, the right nomenclature, the right way of assessing and discussing this kind of striker, as I'm demonstrating right now by fumbling all my words. So, for you, how do you evaluate not just this performance, but us playing with this type of striker as something that we could do going forward?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just a lack of frame of reference. The closest frame of reference, the closest frame of reference we've got is Theo Walcott, who obviously only played through the centre a few times. And actually, when he did play through the centre, he became something quite different. But you're right, and he's like the opposite of Giroud, who's high touch, high involvement, but you wouldn't necessarily put your life on him scoring. And actually Aubameyang is, we've discussed this before, he's not enormously clinical. It's just he takes up such good positions, particularly from corners. The way he loiters on that back post, he gets tons of chances like that. It's really interesting the way he kind of just peels away on the back post at corners, and he nearly scored in the first half. But I think you're right. I think it's just a case of a lot of us are. It's almost like a Giroud version of the Stockholm syndrome. Like, we don't recognise a striker unless he's like either battling for headers or like got his back to it. Like we've become so used to the idea that a striker is someone who's got to do something with his back to goal. And you don't necessarily always have to. This is just who Aubameyang is. He's low touch, but he's high chance, effectively. But you do have to have the correct structure around him. We talked a bit about that already. You've got to have the right type of player around him. Again, a bit like Theo Walcott, I always thought Alexis Sanchez and Theo Walcott was a brilliant partnership because, we know because they're kind of the same but opposites. Like, Sanchez wants the ball all the time and Theo doesn't. He's just interested in it in front of goal, and I thought they really complemented each other, and that's the sort of dynamic we're looking for here. And I do think someone like it. Well, we already know Mkhitaryan and Aubameyang have a relationship from their previous clubs. And I think someone like Iwobi and Aubameyang is potentially quite an interesting mix as well. Just because I agree with Clive. I'm not sure Ozil and Aubameyang is a great fit, and I don't really think Ramsey and Aubameyang is a great fit either. But it's very much horses for courses, and I'm happy for, in some games it's going to be Lacazette. I tend to think maybe the bigger games, it's going to be Lacazette because we probably need that kind of work rate up front. But for games like this, I'm more than happy with Aubameyang. And again, maybe a little bit like this performance, maybe we're slightly overthinking it. Aubameyang won us the game, and it's very 2018, isn't it, for a striker to score the winning goal and then everyone to kind of stroke their chins and say, but what does it all mean?
Yeah.
And what does he do? And it's like, well, he won us the game, and that's perhaps 10-15 years ago that would have been enough, but obviously we analyse the game a little bit more now.
And he's the leading scorer in the Premier League. And by the way, we saw people say Cristiano Ronaldo is actually holding Real Madrid back because all he does is score and he doesn't make his teammates better, and how's that working out? So I agree with you, and I'm guilty of this. With all the stats we have now and all the ways we can analyze the game, sometimes we're guilty of over-analyzing the game. I think the shame of it is we probably don't have the player who could get the most out of Aubameyang, a Hazard, Sadio Mane, Raheem Sterling, someone who can always beat a guy and push it to the byline, right, and get into positions to cut back. And ironically, I don't think it's a coincidence that it's Kolasinac who gets him the assist, and Nacho Monreal, another player who has provided him well, because those are players who do seem to get into wide positions, and it was Hector Bellerin who fed him those beautiful chances in the Chelsea game. I don't know that we have quite the player to unlock his best potential. I heard someone wanting to jump back in. Tim, did you want to quickly come back in on that?
Yeah, I think the closest players we have to unlock his potential were all on the pitch at the weekend. As simple as that.
Oh, I agree. I just don't know if any of them are quite a round peg, round hole. You know what I mean? Like they're all
if
8 out
you're
of 10.
saying to me, if you're saying to me we need to upgrade a couple of those, then that's a different conversation, right? Because I think we'd all agree with that, right? So, but if you're talking about putting Aubameyang in the system, you're giving him 2 wing backs that are sprinting to the byline. You've got 2 inside forwards that can carry the ball and dribble and go beyond their man. 2 inside forwards that work back, but also were there for the second ball. And they could rob people and give Aubameyang the ball. Everything was geared for him. I think he had 4 shots in a game, I believe, or something like that. He could have scored 2 goals easy. The one when Mkhitaryan robbed him and laid him in. He chose the harder side to finish. If he goes across the goal, that's a goal. Simple as that. And that's classic out of nowhere. And I think, which is what I mean. Today, the Bournemouth game for me was a major tactical step forward, because we are moving towards a period of a number of games in December where we've got basically 2 strikers. So we're going to have to get a system where we have 1 striker on the pitch, 1 striker to come on. And we got a situation where we're going to have to get what I call a points accumulation setup, which gets the best out of our players. Monreal's done for 2-3 weeks, and when he comes back, he can't play a game every 3-4 days, which you need end of December. So this could be. I hesitate to say this because you never can tell with Emery. This could be it for a couple of weeks, and I'll be fine for it over Christmas, because that square in the middle, you can rotate the players around. The wing backs sort of pick themselves, but you could add obviously Maitland-Niles into that on the right hand side, and your 3 defenders pick themselves, and you just rotate the strikers, right? And so it's something that you can plug and play. And I think we could accumulate a lot of points. It hides a lot of weaknesses until we get to January and a little bit of a rest.
Yeah, well, speaking of plug and play and hiding weaknesses, let's sell you some lingerie. We are going to definitely help you out because, gentlemen, if you are thinking of buying that mop or that vacuum cleaner for your loved one this holiday season, I implore you, stop what you're doing and listen to the next 90 seconds or so of this podcast. We are going to not only help you build a better relationship, but have a much, much merrier Christmas. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. And maybe get Paul's thoughts on that when we come back. When we come back, we'll do some quick hitters, talk about substitutions, talk about the result, talk about the impending big games, the trip to, Paul, what's it called?
Foreskin pullover.
All that and more right after the lingerie ads. Coming up next. Okay, it's time to tell you about our friends at enclosedlingerie.com. That's enclosed, ENCLOSED, lingerie, LINGERIE, enclosedlingerie.com. You're going to want to go there right now because they are offering you $35 off any gift of lingerie from their site using checkout code ARSENAL. Enclosed Lingerie is a lingerie of the month gift, similar to beer of the month or flower of the month, but every month you are going to receive high-end luxury lingerie for your partner. This is something that you got to do. It enhances the intimacy and the closeness in your relationship. That doesn't happen on its own. It takes time, it takes energy and effort, and this shows real thoughtfulness. Plus, you don't have to wander around a department store sheepishly. You're getting something with a perfect fit guarantee, so size will never be an issue, and you're going to love giving this gift to your partner. I'm married, I have a toddler, I have a great relationship with my wife, but I have to admit that keeping that closeness is something you have to really focus on, especially as time goes by and your family grows. So this is something you should absolutely do for your loved one. Go to enclosedlingerie.com, enter Arsenal at checkout. You'll get $35 off any enclosed gift, and you're giving something that shows real thoughtfulness, that's unique, that's just for you and your partner. Go there now, enclosedlingerie.com, and enter Arsenal at checkout for $35 off your gift. Do it now. And we're back. I don't know about you, but that got my blood pumping, and I hope you are now excited to hear what we have to say about the rest of the match and the matches to come. Our trip to, Paul, how do you say it?
Foreskin pullover.
Yeah. Okay, so Paul, let me start with you. So look, I had a pretty good read on this Bournemouth game, I think. I was looking at it. I was like, gosh, Iwobi's really ball dominant. He's doing a really good job, and Torreira's keeping things tight. This is great, and they get taken off. Explain the subs to me, because, look, you can't argue with the results, but Emery seems to have a way of zigging when everyone else is zagging. He takes Torreira off, and he takes Iwobi off. Mkhitaryan stays on. He brings on Guendouzi. It was confusing. I mean, how did you feel about those decisions and how they panned out?
I was very confused, so I'd probably be the wrong man to ask. But I will say this, the Torreira one, which didn't make any sense, he cleared up. Apparently Torreira signaled to the touchline he was tired, shagged out from playing 2 games for Uruguay, and had the smart sense to say he was starting to flag a little bit. So Guendouzi comes on. So that made some sense. It was very interesting that it was Iwobi that got yanked ahead of Mkhitaryan, because I think, like you, I think I'm in your camp. I thought Mkhitaryan had a terrible game for execution.
Paul. Finally, we're on the same page when it comes to criticism.
I think he was the perfect player for the right system in that game. And I think what's very encouraging is, I'm a Mkhitaryan man, at least in principle, in concept, and I thought his opportunities at Arsenal might be quite constrained this season, and yet, even though his form of late wouldn't give you too much encouragement to make him a starter, he's actually starting to get more and more games, and obviously we saw in this game that he's very much the right player for the system. If he can get a bit more confidence or a bit more output or higher level of execution. But as the boys pointed out, his shtick worked. He was in the right place, doing the right things, all over the place. So it surprised me, back to your point, that it was Iwobi that got yanked rather than Mkhitaryan, based on form on the pitch. On the other hand, Mkhitaryan has shown time and again he'll do his shtick for 90 minutes, basically with no drop off. So that was kind of impressive.
Yeah.
And it was not. I think the Nketiah substitution is as easily explained as we needed to make a sub to run down the clock.
Yeah, that one was easy. And look, I mean, Iwobi's engine has been the one thing you'd have to say about him being problematic. So I agree with that. I mean, Tim,
and two big games coming up. So
yes, well, that's what I wanted to allude to, Tim. I mean, how much do you think that this lineup to begin with, coupled with the substitution patterns, was done with an eye towards Spurs and United from Sunday to Wednesday? I mean. And again, not just the substitutions, but the formation, the lineup. I mean, is that overreading it, or do you think that he may have been auditioning something for those games?
It's possible. I hadn't considered that, actually. I'm not convinced. I think maybe one or two of the substitutions, he referenced Torreira looking a bit tired, which because I was slightly, not baffled isn't the right word, but I was surprised by that substitution at that phase of the game. And by the way, I think Torreira played a slightly different role. He played quite a bit higher up on this occasion, because I really think Arsenal were into the idea of snatching the ball before Bournemouth had a chance to build play. And if you look at the chance where Torreira hits the post, it's because he's right up the pitch intercepting. And
the bygone Francis Coquelin role.
Yeah, we did use him a little bit higher up to try. It was very clear we had a plan to press Bournemouth quite high.
The boy can play.
Yeah, no, he can. He certainly can. He's got a good pass on him as well. And obviously that role is probably slightly more physically demanding because he has to cover a bit more ground, whereas, when he's just sweeping up in front of the back four. So there could be that. To it, Iwobi, I think that made sense. He was tired, and Nketiah, it was just a time waster, wasn't it? But at the time, I was quite surprised by the Guendouzi for Torreira substitution, and it might have been with an eye on what's to come. But thinking about it, I just think it's probably more that we asked Torreira to do a slightly more demanding role, and it took its toll in the last few minutes.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, keep going.
He loves bringing Guendouzi on, doesn't he?
Yeah. He wants Guendouzi to feel like he is fully a part of the first team and fully integrated. Yeah. And I mean, maybe I'm not saying he just wants him to feel that way. He's an excellent player. But, certainly, and maybe this is just purely psychological. You think of Torreira as a secure player who, protects the back four, and Guendouzi is more of a creative type player and a possession player who's not as good defensively. I don't think that's purely emotional. I think that there's some actual information behind that, but ultimately, I mean, it got the job done. And Clive, I guess we can put this game to bed because we have a couple other issues to touch on before we say goodbye here.
Yep.
By going to the very last moments of the game and Mustafi's tackle that leads to the free kick that finishes off the game in usual calming Arsenal fashion. Mustafi just always seems to have one move in him every game that makes you want to fire him out of a cannon into the sun. I mean, how do you feel about that particular tackle, his performance, and just generally what he does to your nerves?
Match-saving tackle.
Is that how you see
I'll
it,
tell
Paul?
you.
We'll come back to you on that one.
I mean, fans' nerve, right? It's a big game, big result. We really needed to win. And I said online, I felt we were playing 3-1 up football rather than 2-1 football. And that worried me a bit. And the substitutions I totally agreed with, by the way. And Iwobi was fading. I was just about to criticise him that he lays on the pre-assist for the goal. He was fading, took him off. It's the right things to do. Then Mustafi comes along. And we are sitting there thinking, okay, we've got away with it. Guendouzi's come on. He's come on Bob Marley style, nice and relaxed, not really intense. We don't really need that. I think it's Guendouzi or Xhaka, and then we've got to find somebody else to bring some energy on to replace Torreira, and I'm hoping that can be Maitland-Niles, because we need to get a sprinter on the pitch. We can't have two Bob Marleys running around, right? So we lost a bit of intensity there. So what happens around the D, we start to lose a bit of traction, cutbacks, shots from the edge of the area, because we're not pressing the ball, right? So then Mustafi flies in, and I swear to God, I had a tweet ready. I had it saved, ready to go, and it was, I had to delete the draft, right? But it wasn't complimentary, because I could not believe what he did, right? And
You couldn't believe it, or you could totally believe it?
Well, there was a cutback that Stanislaus got a shot off in the second half, and Mustafi finds himself on the floor. He finds himself on the floor for Brooks's goal. What's he doing on the floor, middle of the box? The cutback. He finds he's waving a leg from behind him. He's overrun it. On the floor, when you run back, you look behind you, you make sure you have lines of defence. You don't go on the same lines to the cutbacks there, you don't collapse. And then the edge of the area, he just dives in and kills somebody at the edge of the area. I'm thinking, if this goes in, there's going to be uproar. And there was a couple of those. I mean, Xhaka had a couple of clearances that got robbed. He got robbed a couple of times. And if they would have scored from them, the narrative might have been completely different, because you've got a couple of players there that people are torn about, and now you can add Mkhitaryan to that list because of perceived bad play. That if they make a mistake that costs us points, I dread to think what's going to happen to them. But Mustafi, I was ready to jump on that bandwagon, I'll tell you that, because I thought that was a bad decision, shall we say. But we got away with it, and that position, right side of a three, is his best position for me, and I don't mind these three playing for the whole month of December like that. If we can manage to get away with it.
If we don't play a back three, are you ready to go to Socrates and Holding as the pairing?
Well, Socrates is our best defender. Simple as that. I don't care. And, he's our best defender. Holding's doing really well in possession. I mean, his passing stats the weekend were fantastic, and at times he put himself in the left back spot. I really like his responsibility that he took. I mean, Tim is probably right in front of you in the second half. He was down in that corner doing Cruyff turns, and I'm looking at his feet. I'm thinking, wow, you're something special on the ball, mate. You really are.
They didn't all come off, Clive.
Yeah, but you to have the confidence to do that. That shows you his progression, and it showed me.
Let me handle this, Clive. Neither did Cruyff's.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well.
So you know what impressed me about this whole performance, Elliot? I mean, if you can name me a time in the last few years where we've gone away from home against a decent side and won without Ozil, Sanchez, Ramsey, Koscielny, none of them starting, and what I saw was personalities sustaining late in the game. And I was really impressed, particularly with the two behind the striker, to not fade away after mistakes, still show personality, and not make everybody yearn for Ozil and Ramsey to come on, because I felt they were doing a good enough job. And I think for me, we're starting to see a new team develop and go to war in these away games and sustain a performance. And it won't always be smooth, but I think it's a start of a different page.
And look, we were 3-0 down to this team at that ground in January before halftime. Was it the past January or the one before that? Have I confused my
It might have been the one before that.
We were down 3-0 and the game finished 3-3. And wasn't that Giroud scorpion kick that he gave it the big celebration at the end, and then didn't run back to the center circle?
I think we lost there last year.
Okay, yeah, and 3-3 before that.
2 quick goals.
So so Paul, that actually leads me to sort of my last question on this match, which is just, have we underrated the value, importance, and quality of this result? I mean, I see a lot of people that are hemming and hawing about the performance, and I look at the XG, and we restricted them, on XG to, I think, one of our better defensive performances of the season by those metrics. I realize that's not everything, but just worth paying attention to. Sure, we got a little fortunate with the own goal, but I thought we had periods where we were really dominant. We tried a new system and got away with it without some of our biggest players on the pitch. And, it's a game that could have been a trap right after an interlull and right before playing Spurs and United consecutively. So, do you think that this is a more valuable and more creditable performance and result than maybe is being given credit for?
Yeah, I think it's a big deal. As said, the build-up to the match in the media, Eddie Howe was absolutely rubbing his hands at this game and had a plan to come at us and hurt Arsenal the way Arsenal has been hurt for quite a few years now. So this was really set up for Bournemouth at home to come at us and hit us where we're hurt. We have not produced a lot of offense recently, and we produce goals, but we haven't produced a lot of offense. The stats aren't there because a lot of the activity in the final third isn't where you want it to be. But in this game, I think Clive asked about crosses. We had something like 21 crosses. We had 10 from the left, 9 from the right, and then 8 corners. So that gets you 29 balls into the box where Aubameyang is. We produced a lot away from home, building up from the back with 3 centre backs. So this gives us another way to play, and we have looked somewhat neutered and toothless. Can you be neutered and toothless?
You're getting it at both ends.
It's like something out of Game of Thrones with Ramsay Bolton.
Or
but anyway,
your Human Centipede. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is quite a sea change against a team that I think had they beaten us, everybody would have been an expert afterwards about how this was kind of had been in the mail, that this was, our comeuppance was going to come. The underlying stats showed that we weren't producing, and against a clever, inventive Eddie Howe, I think there's a big win strategically for us, and also tactically. The manager out-tacticked Eddie Howe. Yeah, it's narrative, and we won. So you write your own narratives at that point.
No, I totally agree, though. I think he confused them.
We out-tacticked them. Yeah, and we have another way of playing and another way of winning. And going into 2 big games, ignoring foreskin pullover, which I never like to do. We got 2. We started the game with playing 2 of the top teams. We're going to play 2 more of the top teams. Going into basically the second third, we played 13 games. We're going to play the next 13, kicking off with two of the top 6-ish. And
to be fair, the Bournemouth game, we played a bigger team than Manchester United, but yeah.
Yep, granted. But OT, Old Trafford away. So it's a key win at a key time and gives us a new way of playing with a different set of players. So we don't feel we have that dependency, that crutch of certain players have to be on the field for us to be full strength.
Yeah, look, let's face it, guys. We go into games with expectations of what we're going to see. When it was Arsene Wenger, we knew exactly what we were going to see. So the praise we would give or the criticism we would make was pre-written. And then the team just went out and either won or lost, and based on which they did, we just basically printed our preconceived praise or criticism, if that makes sense. You see what I'm saying? We knew what was going to go wrong if we lost, and we knew what was going to go right if we won. What's really tough for people right now is we have no idea what to expect. And as a result, when it goes right, sometimes we're really confused about what we just saw because it just wasn't what we were expecting to see. But you know what? It's also not what the opposition were expecting to see, and I thought that was great. Look, after the game on Thursday, we will do a podcast, and since that's going to be probably a pointless game, we'll do a lot of preview stuff for the upcoming big games in the league. And that means I've saved us a few minutes, Tim, and lucky you because you get the first whack at it for Mesut Ozil talk. Hooray! We get to talk about Mesut Ozil because this never goes wrong and isn't polarizing whatsoever. The manager comes out and basically says, I thought this was going to be a physically demanding game and we needed players who were up for those challenges. I'm not quoting directly because I don't have it in front of me, but you're more than welcome to go chase down the quotes. He didn't have to say anything. He did say something. And unfortunately, when you say anything about Mesut Ozil, it's going to get attention. He is our biggest earner at the club. So I want to address this in two ways. The first is your thoughts on what the manager said specifically. So his decision to leave out Ozil and what he said in response to that decision.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we all know why he left out Ozil really without the explanation. I mean, it's quite obvious, isn't it? And the thing is, so in the ground when we got the lineups and everything, I didn't hear anyone complaining. I didn't hear people were surprised, but I didn't hear anyone going, "Oh my God, how can you do that? How can you leave him out?" It was very much, yeah, you probably do away from home against a team who's quite intense. And listen, there are good tactical reasons for it that we've gone into, like we're going for a bit of a high press and that we wanted to play with intensity, and I think we did that, and obviously Ozil just doesn't do that. But I think it's quite interesting that Emery's been so open about it and almost not quite accusatory, but I feel like, so I don't think, well, I think we know that the relationship between Emery and Ozil is not brilliant, which is not to say it's absolutely terrible and going to tear the club asunder or anything, but I mean it's clearly not. And Ozil, he didn't even go out and warm up, so there was obviously no plan to use him whatsoever. And I do think there's a little bit of a message in there. I do think there is a slight element of my way or the highway, and a little bit, look, we're doing this for this game, and if you can't or won't do it, then I'll pick players that can, which is absolutely fine and absolutely as it should be. But I think the thing is, this didn't really cause any kind of outrage, did it? Or any I think that tells you a lot. That first of all, we know he can't do that intensity thing, but also because he doesn't. For his talent, he doesn't produce often enough, and that's why I think people have been quite accepting of it. And I think actually a lot of people would have supported the decision. I think it was right, and I think it was right that he didn't come on either. I don't think I'm not sure he really fits Emery's ideal. He certainly can't really play one of those wide forward roles. So we didn't play with a number 10, so we didn't need him.
Well, so that was going to leave.
We created a lot more recently than we have with him. I mean, just if you did the raw stats, crosses, balls into the box, etc., etc.
This was our most passes in the final third all season, and Ozil didn't have a bar of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that leads me to my second question for you, Tim. I'll just stay with you for a second, which is then, I mean, look, we gave Mesut Ozil the contract. It is what it is. I don't think every single podcast where he doesn't play or doesn't play well should be a referendum on that decision. We made the decision, and now he's an Arsenal player and he is our highest paid player. And while I think we would all prefer to have spent $350,000 a week on a guy who's influencing every game in a major way, he's certainly a useful and talented player we can get the most out of. But do you think, given that Emery tried to start the season with Aaron Ramsey at the 10, and given that he played a position with no number 10 in this game, and given that we've sort of seen the struggles Ozil's had in the 4-2-3-1 playing that 10 role, do you think that really the biggest issue we have right now is we have a manager, and maybe just football changing in general, but certainly under Emery, who does not have use for a mercurial, free-roaming, playmaking number 10?
Yeah, absolutely. I think two of our best performances this season have been this one and Fulham away. And we didn't play. Not only did we not play with Ozil, we didn't play with a 10 in either of them. We kind of structured the attack in a different way, and we went for Mkhitaryan and Iwobi in those kind of wide forward positions. And I do think that that's quite revealing. And yeah, it's well, listen, we've known it all season. It's a problem for us. We've put all of this resource into someone really we probably shouldn't have, but because we let Arsene Wenger stay too long, there's a few of these decisions that have been made which were the decisions of a fairly desperate man who was kind of thrashing around for solutions at the end, and lots of short-termist decisions were taken. And we've put all of this money into like Mkhitaryan and Ozil, which means we can't afford to keep Ramsey, more or less. So and Emery's got to unpick a fair amount of that. It's not of his making, it's not his fault, but those are the situations he's got, and this is a problem. I do think, and not just Arsenal, I do think there is an argument that If we lost Ozil tomorrow, a bit like Ramsey, we've been saying with Ramsey this year, well, when we lose him, we're not going to replace him like for like. I think, let's say we sold Ozil in the summer, we wouldn't buy someone like him. We'd probably buy another wide forward, because that fits what Emery wants. And I think we're going to see some of that churn in the next few transfer windows.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point, right? When you lose an Alexis Sanchez, you could argue that right now what we are missing is an Alexis Sanchez. Maybe not exactly him, but someone with some of his characteristics. If we lost Mesut Ozil tomorrow, I think the player we would want in exchange for that would be a very different type of player. And that is the issue. But Clive, I'm going to frustrate the hell out of you and not give you a shot at that conversation right now. There'll be plenty of opportunities to do it. I assure you. But we are out of time, and I need to get one more question in because I think it's worth talking about. So if you don't mind, I'd just like to do that. We travel to a potentially a war zone. I mean, all joking aside, it looks like Ukraine and Russia are back at it to some extent. And it's not funny. I don't mean it to be glib, but it is the case. It's also going to be 13 below Celsius the night of the match. And it's a long-ass trip before we play Spurs and United in the space of 3 days from Sunday to Wednesday, or 4 days, however. I was told there'd be no math. So, Clive, is there anybody we should be bringing? Should Unai Emery even go? Should we just send Bold? What is the right amount of caution to bring to this totally pointless match?
Yeah, well, he hasn't got all the choices in the world. He hasn't got multitudes of defenders falling out of trees.
He can play all the kids. Every kid that's at the club.
Be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of days. We'll start to see people hit YouTube, welcome to so-and-so, and get to know this player. You start seeing those type of things come out of the media.
Justin Smith Johnson Lowe.
Then you know what's going on. Under 23s are playing tonight, I believe, versus Derby. So I had a look at that team to see who was in it, and there were some notable players missing, like Willock, for example, things like that. So we'll see what happens in the next few days. Smith Rowe and Willock, I don't think they played. Koscielny played, so it'll be quite interesting. But hey, look, we all know what it's all about. I don't know who we're playing. I can't pronounce it, and I don't particularly care because
Paul?
we've got
Skin pullover.
Thank you.
We got some wiggle room there, haven't we? Literally, right? So so yeah,
that made me feel funny.
we got some wiggle room there, and we're all focused on the weekend, and I can't wait for that. I cannot wait for it.
We're going to get into that after the Thursday game, I assure you, because we're not going to talk about that match much. But go ahead, please.
Yeah, if we replace Ozil, we replace him with a more intense player. Just simple as that. That's where football's going. It's all about.
You did it anyway.
I'm not letting you walk away with that one, mate. No chance. It's all about intensity, right? And if we can't make him more intense, then he can't play for Arsenal. It's as simple as that. And he will end up with a reduced role on particular situations. And I, for one, am pleased that the managers recognise that if we played him, he would have had a big target on his back, and he'd have got run off his feet. And that's exactly what Eddie Howe expected. And we surprised him and then run them off their feet. And it was a masterclass.
I'll tell you something. I want to be clear about something with Ozil. I don't think it's a lack of effort. I don't think Ozil doesn't try. I think Ozil is a certain type of player. Watch Lionel Messi if you want to see the least intense player ever. Lionel Messi walks more than any player you've ever watched on a football pitch. But he also does 18 of the most amazing things you've ever seen in your life every 90 minutes. So,
By the way, Elliot, I want him to play against Spurs on Sunday. I want Ozil to play against Spurs on Sunday because that's in our house, in our environment, with our flow, with our rhythm, and he's a big part of that. But we've watched this scenario away from home many, many, many times now, and we can't trust it. So let's go another way. Yeah. Right? And away from home, we've gone another way, and it worked. And we should just praise that, right?
Absolutely. And the manager shouldn't pick the team based on what the number written down on their paycheck every 2 weeks. Not that they get paid like that, but you get the idea. And maybe they do. Maybe they get direct deposit. Maybe he literally gets £350,000 direct deposit every 2 weeks, which, God bless you, Mesut. Anyway, wouldn't that be nice? All right. I think that's enough. After Thursday's game, we'll do a lot of previewing. Tim will obviously have a Patreon preview for the Spurs game. You do not want to miss that. Sign up for our Patreon, patreon.com/Arsenal Vision podcast. It's just, you're going to love the content you get there. It's like this, only if this was good. So it's definitely worth going. If you don't want to do it, though, we totally love you anyway and appreciate you for listening. And Paul's on Twitter at @PositiveMyPants. Thank you, Paul.
It's like this, but Clive and I aren't allowed to talk during
Yeah,
it.
exactly. It's
Tim's
even
on
better.
Twitter at Stilberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Yeah, it is a huge pleasure for me to have you on this podcast. You have no idea. Clive is on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to take a couple days off and come back after Arsenal 10, Paul.
Foreskin pull over.
Nil.
Damn it.
Cheers.
Damn
Bye,
it.
everybody.
I fumbled it.
We'll talk
I
to you after then.
fumbled it.
Arsenal 10, the thing Paul said no.